Well, if you don't know the news by now, horror master Wes Craven has died. He passed away after a battle with brain cancer. It is a very heartbreaking. I have no words for how I feel about it, other than just sad. We've lost one of the guys who gave us so many good horror classics and many classic horror characters as well. And I kind of feel obligated to do this list, or to at least make a video or something about his passing, or at least in honor of his passing, because he's one of the directors that left a very big kind of impression on who I am. I mean, I will admit that, I haven't seen every film in his filmography, but without discovering some hidden gems in his filmography, like Serpent and the Rainbow, or People Under the Stairs, I don't think I would be as big as a cult film person as I am today. Those are the few cult films that I kind of got into, that helped me get deeper into it. And and he's probably one of the best horror directors of all time. I mean, there's no arguing that. Even coming from someone who at one time said Lloyd Kaufman was one of the best independent exploitation film directors, even I have given some of his films very low ratings. Wes Craven, on the other hand, I've never given his films a rating below 7 out of 10. So I kind of feel obligated to make this video and to give my thoughts on his death and my opinion on his films. He was a very, very interesting man, and if you've seen the documentary Never Sleep Again about the Nightmare on Elm Street series, or if you've read up on the guy, you'll know that he was a very cool, kind of creative and very cool with the fans kind of person. Like, he understood that this random person he's never heard of, meeting him is like the greatest moment in this person's life, even if it's not the greatest moment in his. And that's an aspect not all like horror actors and directors have, which is very sad. But let's just get this all over with. Let's get started. The top 10 Wes Craven films. So, number 10 and 9, I'm going to keep a bit short, and I'm just going to basically give you the titles of the films and my rating on it, and then that's it, because I haven't seen either of these movies in years, and honestly, they're probably the two films out of his filmography that are my least favorite. So at number 10 we have Scream 3. Scream 3 was an okay sequel. I mean, it's not terrible. It's definitely not one of the worst sequels ever. It's pretty solid for a sequel, but it doesn't sit up there with the likes of Dream Warriors for best sequels ever. It really doesn't. Overall, I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10, and that's all I have to say about it. It's been years. At number 9, we have Scream 2. This one I honestly watched a few months ago. Just on a whim. I kind of felt like watching it after I watched the first Scream on a whim. But Scream 2 was probably one of the best horror sequels ever made, honestly. It's a really solid sequel. It doesn't, absolutely just like skip over the fact that there were characters at one time in the previous film and then just go on to new characters. It doesn't do that. It continues to focus on these same characters. which is something that not a lot of horror sequels do. Example being Nightmare on Elm Street 2 Freddy's Revenge, when he's getting revenge on some random guy who moves into the house, when he should be getting revenge on Nancy, the person who, kind of thwarted his plans in the first Nightmare on Elm Street. But overall, I still really, really like Scream 2, and I'd probably have to give it a 7 or 8 out of 10. Next, we have Wes Craven's only zombie film, Serpent and the Rainbow. Apparently a film based on a true story, which it is based on a novel, Serpent and the Rainbow, or a book that is apparently a true story about a guy that goes to Haiti, after hearing about, like, voodoo zombies and stuff like that, and he eventually becomes a voodoo zombie himself, and kind of, I watched this film, not like a few months ago. I can't even remember all that happens in it, but I still remember really liking the movie, and honestly thinking it is definitely one of the hidden gems amongst his filmography, most definitely. Serpent and the Rainbow, it's now getting a Blu-ray release from Scream Factory, and I'm very happy that his lesser known stuff, like People Under the Stairs, which I am gonna pick up that Blu-ray, but his lesser known stuff like People Under the Stairs, The Shocker, and Deadly Blessing, and I think there was one other that I'm drawing a blank, Serpent and the Rainbow, that I'm actually talking about. But I like the movie, and I already own it, and I honestly don't like the movie enough to buy a $20, anywhere from like $25 to $15 Blu-ray. I honestly don't think it's worth it. I don't love the film that enough to spend that much money on it, but I still really, really like the film. And last time I checked, it's available in a few of those cheap 4-movie DVD sets, which you can find some of them at FYE for $4 sometimes. But overall, it's a very solid movie, and one that's definitely forgotten a lot. I'd probably give it an 8. Next, we have Wes Craven's only superhero movie, well, at least as far as I know, his only superhero movie, Swamp Thing, based on the Swamp Thing comic books. So, Swamp Thing was... I remember watching Swamp Thing when I was 8 years old and absolutely loving the movie to just absolute death. And I remember the only way I'd be able to watch it is if I caught it on TV. It was one of those movies that I couldn't find a copy of anywhere, and it was one of those movies that I could only find if I caught it on cable one night, and I'd have to DVR it, or if I rented it off Netflix again because I wanted to watch it. And it's such a fun, entertaining little B movie. I mean, it's definitely not the best movie ever made, but it's definitely not one of the worst. It's very entertaining, fun, and for a young kid, maybe even a little bit scary kind of movie. And it's another 8 out of 10 for me. I'm sorry if I'm not acting very jovial, but I'm still kind of, obviously with the death of Wes Craven, I'm kind of struggling to get through this list without at least shedding a few tears. Next is his film debut, The Last House on the Left, at number 6. The Last House on the Left is probably one of the greatest exploitation films ever made, and it is easily one of the greatest rape and revenge films ever made. I don't think there's any arguing whether or not this film has hit the mainstream, because I'm pretty sure it's one of the few exploitation films that, even though it's very critically panned, it still hit the mainstream and hit it pretty fucking hard. And to this day, it's still a hard to watch film. And honestly, even though it's not like, an art film, I still give the movie a 9 out of 10 because honestly it raises a perfectly good question. If someone hurt your daughter or someone you loved or even killed them, how far would you go to make sure those people pay? And that is a perfect, absolutely kind of perfect idea because it's something that people, at least I think about quite often. If something happened to me or my family, how far would I go to get revenge? Let's just go on. I can't. I don't think I can I need a break for a second. At number 5, we have Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Now, it may seem a bit strange to put a film that was, basically one of his, most, critically acclaimed films, to put his most critically acclaimed film, at least one of them, at only the 5 spot seems a bit weird. But, honestly, this was one of the entries in the Nightmare on Elm Street series that I couldn't get into. I still absolutely love this movie, and I still give it a solid 10 out of 10. And, today I can watch the movie and I can get into it because I get what it's going for now. But when I was younger and I watched it, I just thought it wasn't as good as the other entries in the series. There weren't as many cheesy one-liners. Say fucking change it to prime time, bitch. All those really fun one-liners. It didn't have those, and it felt really, really out of place in the series. But honestly, it still works very well. Even as I've grown up, I kind of see what Wes was going for with the film, and I kind of slowly got why it's widely considered to be one of the best of the series, or at least one of the best of the series. It's a very well-made movie, and it's just a fantastic expression on kind of how even the simplest ideas of fear and how symbols of fear and horror in our culture, in our popular culture, can affect someone mentally. I actually kind of choose to believe that New Nightmare is actually a psychological horror film, and that the entire thing is in Heather Langenkamp's head, and she's imagining that Freddy is there. And that is kind of, and that's kind of what Wes was going for with the whole the wall, the claw marks across the wall and stuff like that. I don't know what else to say anymore. At number 4, we have Scream, another one of his films that is critically acclaimed and widely considered to be one of his best. I'll be honest, when I first saw Scream when I was younger, I really liked it. And then I kind of grew up and I started hating it. And then as I became a horror fan again and I rewatched it, and I slowly got all the jokes and references in the film, I slowly started to love it again. Scream is one of the first self-referential horror films, and that's a very big deal. It's one of the first horror films to dedicate entire scenes and sections of dialogue to referencing other horror films, while still keeping the script, while still not making the script just about while still not making that scene just about referencing horror films, while still making it kind of central to the plot or something like that. It's a one of a kind film in the sense that around the 80s, the slasher genre died, and then this thing came along and kind of breathed a bit of fresh air into the film, into the slasher genre, and really helped kind of like make the film, make the genre just, it helped like, I'm trying to think of the word, like evolve or kind of revolutionize, I guess, the genre of the slasher genre by basically just being self-referential and kind of making fun of it. And it's funny that this film gets an NC-17 rating, got an NC-17 rating originally, because watching it, you know, I honestly can't see why. I mean, there's quite a bit of violence in the film, but it's really not that bad. Again, this is coming from Mr. 449 horror movies, but it's a movie, all right. It's a great movie, and it's one that I don't think any horror fan should go without. And it's one of the shining examples that even in the 90s, the horror genre didn't completely suck. That's the 10 out of 10, 100 out of 100. It's easily Wes Craven's, one of his best, you know, like, slasher films. Most definitely. At number 3, we get to one of his more lesser known films, and one of his films that I honestly think is probably one of his, I mean, this is in the top, this is like number 3, so obviously it is one of his all-time best, in my opinion. It is People Under the Stairs. People Under the Stairs is kind of like a grim fairy tale of, like, slashers. It's a really interesting film because it combines, like, elements of modern, it combines elements of what at the time was like kind of modern urban culture, kind of what what goes on in like the setting of Candyman. It kind of combines the, you know, very urban setting of Candyman, the very, very good Clive Barker based film, and it takes like a very kind of grim fairy tale look into one of the houses that's in this neighborhood. And obviously the movie is titled People Under the Stairs, and the movie's basically about this couple that kidnaps children and puts them under the stairs if they don't behave, and then they stay under the stairs and they become, like, you know, they get fed human flesh, and they're kept kind of down there as just like a group of savages with flashlights and nothing else to do. It's a very dark, interesting, and kind of funny movie. And I don't know, I feel like this film is far superior to Scream or New Nightmare, but even though I only give this film a 9 out of 10, I still think it's better than Scream, which I gave a 10. I still think it's better than New Nightmare, which I gave a 10. There's just something about the film. It's kind of got some dark humor going on as well, which I really, really like. And yes, I will be picking up the Blu-ray of it from Scream Factory. At number 2, we have another one of Wes Craven's most infamous movies. It is The Hills Have Eyes. I don't know why. I just love this movie. I remember watching it for the first time about a year ago and just thinking that it was just the bee's knees, thinking that it was the cat's pajamas, thinking that it was just an awesome cult film, and it kind of grabs the whole kind of like caveman, you know, like caveman inbred mutant kind of aesthetic of the villains in the film, and it kind of takes that and keeps them as like cavemen, and makes them dress in pelts and wear bones as jewelry and stuff like that. And I really kind of like that. It's kind of like the old age versus the modern age. And I don't think, that's like symbolism that Wes was going for. I think he just wanted to make a really cool movie, which indeed he did. And in fact, not People Under the Stairs, but The Hills Have Eyes is even based on a true story of a clan of people who lived in caves and fed off human flesh for years. So this is a very well-grounded kind of horror film, because this could actually somewhat be plausible. Now, on to well, no, not on to but there's another film from the 70s called Raw Meat, which is about a bunch of a group of like caveman-esque cannibals that live underground underneath a subway in London. And it's a very, very solid, well-made movie. And it's definitely another one of the hidden gems of the 70s. And it is very similar to... It's very, very similar to The Hills Have Eyes in the aesthetic of old versus new. But the problem I have with Raw Meat is they act like cavemen and savages, yet they are, I mean, it's been years since I've seen Raw Meat, but as far as I can remember, they wear, at least somewhat modern clothing. They don't wear, like, pelts of animals and stuff like that. And I can understand they probably couldn't get that underneath the subway, and they're probably just living with what they have, which I guess they could be, like, kind of scavenger cavemen. But I don't know. It's, But anyway, The Hills Have Eyes, 10 out of 10. I mean, obviously it's at the number 2 spot, so easily it's one of my favorite Wes Craven movies, and it's one of his movies that I honestly think doesn't get enough credit. Okay, it's time for number 1. And you should have seen this one coming from a mile away. Number 1 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. The one film that really helped launch Wes into the mainstream film industry. If it wasn't for this film, we wouldn't have Dream Warriors, which is one of the best horror sequels of all time. We wouldn't have the Dream Master. We wouldn't have Freddy's Revenge, although I could kind of live without that one, and Dream Child. Without this singular film, I think an entire generation of children would have gone without nightmares, or would have gone without, absolutely horrifying nightmares. And A Nightmare on Elm Street is one of the few horror series that I got into when I was younger. I mean, Freddy used to scare the hell out of me, and honestly, it kind of still does to this day. I mean, I can still watch the movies and I don't have nightmares, but he's still a bit creepy. But it's... the way that the movie kind of preys on your fears of, even in your deepest sleep, you're not safe from anything. It's a very horrifying kind of idea, and the film itself is very well made, considering it wasn't made on a very big budget. The movie was, fun, scary, violent, a bit quirky, very entertaining, and definitely scary. I remember watching the movies when I was younger and being scared shitless. And then I remember watching the movies when I was about 10 or 11, and I actually started to get into them. And I started watching the entire series, and then I went on to some more of the Friday the 13th movies. Because at the time, I had only seen, one of the Friday the 13th movies, and, almost all of the Halloween movies. And I honestly think that if there's one horror series that is nearly perfect in the sense that all the sequels are at least entertaining, even if they're a bit bad, it's Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, there's not a single sequel in the series that I like absolutely hate with an absolute grudge to where I'll never watch it again. When it comes to Friday the 13th, I already have an entry in the series that's that level of bad for me personally, and it is it's Jason Goes to Hell. Nightmare on Elm Street, on the other hand, other than like the remake, it's a very solid and fun series. Even Freddy vs. Jason, which I honestly don't consider to be part of the actual series, is still okay. I mean, I don't watch that one as much, and I honestly don't think that one's as good as any of the others. And I honestly think it's one of the worst of the series, but I still watch it every now and then. It's not that bad. It's not Jason Goes to Hell levels of bad. It's the one movie Wes will always be remembered for. And the day we lose Robert Englund is going to be a very, very sad day, because the man of our dreams is going to be gone. The two men of our dreams are going to be gone. But let us not quander on the past. Let us not worry about things that have already happened. Let us look towards the future, and let us hope for the best for everybody. Maybe this very sad death of maybe this very sad passing of a very serious maestro of the horror genre will really reawaken the genre and actually make mainstream horror good again. While we do look back and remember Wes's life and his films, we should also look forward and just hope that maybe there's another Wes out there somewhere. Maybe there's already one out there making films right now. We don't know. We may never know. It might happen, it might not. But that's not what's important. What's important is we have hope that maybe one day we'll have someone as good as or as close as we can get to Wes again. I don't want to replace Wes. It's the last thing I want to do. I don't think anybody wants to. And I don't know where I'm going with this anymore. I'm just kind of rambling now. So I'm going to go maybe edit this video and cry a little bit. It's a 10. So, goodbye, Wes. May you rest in peace. You were a very, very great creator and very brilliant director, and we will never forget you. Peace.